watching.
Subscribe. Hello and welcome to Fast and Furious Presents ScreenStalker. I'm Ollie Davis, this is Chopper Pete Quinnell, and today we've got a Hobbs Shaw themed episode, because we both saw the movie yesterday and we really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was fun. Super fun.
We've got the many post-credit scenes explained coming up at the end of the show, so click the timestamps in the video description below if you want to go right to that. All the Easter eggs from the movie that we spotted, what Roman Reigns actually does.
And we'll be going through your comments from yesterday's video as well, where Laurie and Luke asked you who you would cast as Wolverine in the MCU.
But for today's question, tell us what you thought of Hobbs Shaw, and we'll be answering those comments on Monday's episode. Press the thumbs up button, share this video around, and of course give us a subscribe, because we're getting swifty to 50.
We really need to come up with a better slogan.
1,000 subscribers, no, it's still good.
No.
But to kick things off, here's our spoiler-free review of Hobbs Shaw.
Are we doing a jingle for it, or we just go straight into it?
Hobbs Shaw review, there's not a spoiler here, so let's get on with the show, and a lovely time with the boys. Now, I'm not saying it's the best movie ever made, Pete.
I'm glad you're not saying that.
I'm not saying it, but I'm not saying it's the best movie ever made. I'm not doing it. Look, for me, overall in the Fast and Furious franchise, Fast 6 is still peaking it for just overall insanity. But I loved Hobbs Shaw. I thought it was brilliant. It was so much fun.
Yeah, it was stupid and ridiculous, but so much fun because of it. It's wacky, bonkers nonsense in the best way.
And it's already an example of classic wrestling booking, in that they've taken a character from a previous film, Deckard Shaw, played by Jason Statham, who was really good and had this incredible chemistry with The Rock. And they've essentially promoted him from developmental into his own tag team film. Because this whole movie is great in its fun action sequences and that theme of family that it always has in the Fast and Furious franchise. But really, this is all about Hobbs and Shaw, Rock and Stath, because they are just cutting wrestling promos on each other the entire time.
It is non-stop quips, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, doing classic wrestling insults that we know and love. Of saying like, oh, I'm gonna put my boot so far up your ass and blah, 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 all that stuff. There's so much stuff for wrestling fans to enjoy. So I know there's a lot of crossover with wrestling fans on this channel right now. They will enjoy this movie. 1, because it's got The Rock in it. 2, because it's got Roman Reigns in it, which we'll talk about later. And 3, because it's a wrestling movie, essentially. It's just wrestling promos with wrestling moves and people beating up the security guards that run down to try and break up a brawl. That's what it is.
There's one scene on a plane where Rock and Stath are just leaning over the aisle to just trash each other and
so
say
good.
the nastiest, meanest things. It's really funny. But to real talk for a second, Fast and Furious franchises, everyone likes to joke at them because they're just these crazy car movies with weird physics where people can fly through the air and a lot of bikini-clad women. I always argue they're actually very well-told visual direction stories. And Hobbs Shaw has this wonderful piece of visual storytelling going through it. At the start, it's a split screen where you have The Rock on one side and Statham on the other side, always comparing and contrasting the two. Later on in the movie, that develops to them walking through adjacent corridors with a window between them, and they have a clash of styles there. So they're getting closer. It's gone from a filmic device of separating them to an actual physical set piece dividing them, and then that culminates where they really sort of get to love each other as brothers when they're being interrogated and they're on chairs facing each other, and you have these shots where it's directly Stath looking into the camera and Rock looking into the camera. They're looking at each other. It's a fantastic piece of using cinematography and editing to show the development of their relationship.
That was a good point. And on top of that as well, there's an undercurrent theme throughout the movie of family. And it actually gets quite emotional at various points. There's a lot of nice family moments between different relationships throughout various family members and stuff. And it actually is quite emotional, but considering that we don't really like to talk about emotions too much, we're going to do this in our best Jason Statham voice.
So what I really like about the film is that because the whole Fast and Furious franchise movie is about family at the end of the day. It's about family when they're all together at the end having some kind of barbecue.
There was a really nice scene towards the end of the film where The Rock gets to meet up with the rest of his family in Samoa. This is really touching, emotional scene, and it really spoke to me on a personal level about reconnecting with certain family members I hadn't spoken to in years.
I know, I got out of the film and I just thought, man, I just need to reconnect with that family member that I personally have lost touch with because, you know, I don't speak to my uncle that much anymore.
You know, it really got me thinking about just the rest of my family and how much I miss them and, you know, how much I want to see them so much more because it's Hobbs Shaw, you know.
I think I'm going to go and give me uncle a text right now, see if we can go for a drink this weekend.
Yeah, it's a good idea, mate. And also there was loads of cars and, you know, the action scenes were amazing.
But I know what you're all thinking. What did Roman Reigns do?
What did Roman do in Hobbs and Shaw? So Roman Reigns really only features into the Samoan arc of this story, and he's more of a background character. He doesn't really do much. He doesn't have a line in the movie. It's just him doing stuff in the fight scenes. He gets to do a spear. He does a Samoan drop. He goes ooh-ah, etc. That's pretty much it. Like, he doesn't have a line. It's all non-verbal stuff in the movie.
I think you're forgetting, Pete, about his many other turns in the film. Standing in the corner of shots. Nodding at plans. Teleporting to different locations, so he's always in the background of shots. Practice swinging a weapon. And most impressively, moving objects on a table. Easter eggs. Spoiler warning now. Alarm! There are many different little Easter eggs that we've spotted throughout the film, and we're going to start to give away some actually fun stuff that's good to see for the first time when you watch it. So that's your warning, spoiler warning. Get out of here, go and watch the movie, then come back. First off, Ryan Reynolds is in the film.
Oh, and he's great, isn't he?
He's not listed at all in the IMDb credits. He plays a CIA agent called Locke, and he is a good friend of The Rock's going back from way back when, but The Rock doesn't really like him.
It's the Rock and Locke connection.
Reynolds is pretty much playing Deadpool, which means he's playing himself.
Yeah.
It's very, very funny. There's also loads of Game of Thrones references. So this is a spoiler warning for many spoiler warnings about Game of Thrones here, because Locke's character just wants to talk about the twists at the end of the series. Talks about stuff that happens to Jon Snow, Daenerys, so be warned there.
And then there was another brilliant cameo from Kevin Hart as well. So obviously got his former connections with The Rock in previous movies. He had a brilliant reveal during that plane scene that we mentioned earlier. It was an awesome cameo, and he essentially does Kevin Hart things, which is very funny. So he's great as well.
He was also set up as a character that might reoccur as well. He was Agent Dinkley, and he's an air marshal who sorts out a lot of the transport in the film, so that could come into play in possible sequels.
I also think he was a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina. It's like, we need to get these characters to Samoa. How are we going to do that? We'll get him a plane from this guy. It's fine.
Comedian Rob Delaney is also briefly in the movie as a cameo as one of Ryan Reynolds' Agent Locke CIA counterparts.
So the primary kind of villain corporation that we're dealing with is called Etienne, which is most likely a play on Eton, which is where current Prime Minister Boris Johnson went to school, which might be a little subtle dig at them.
The Rock got to do his signature eyebrow spot on a phone call to his daughter.
Jason Statham's character goes in disguise as Franz Gruber, of course a shout out to Hans Gruber from the original Die Hard movie.
But by far the best reference to another movie outside of the Fast and Furious franchise, or maybe, is that when Deckard Shaw, Jason Statham's character, takes Rock and his sister through his own sort of secret hideout underneath the Carpenter's Arms pub in London, there's loads of cars that they're walking past, his sort of bat cave, if you will, and they go past a Mini Cooper, and The Rock makes a joke about how it's a small car for a small man, and Stath says that he used that car on a job in Italy, which is of course a reference to the Italian Job, the seminal British film from the 1960s starring Michael Caine, which had a bank heist pulled off by these Mini Coopers. Now what's really interesting is that Jason Statham starred in the noughties remake of that movie, which might expand Deckard's universe beyond just Hobbs and Shaw. Was Deckard undercover in the noughties remake of The Italian Job?
The Italian Job is now canon in the Fast and Furious universe.
But easily the biggest tease is what happened in the post-credits.
Let's explain the end credit scene. I mean, scenes. There's 3 of them.
Yep, there are a bunch of post-credit scenes, about 4 actually. There's one where Helen Mirren, who plays Deckard Shaw's mum, is sort of broken out of jail with a classic tooth file in the cake trick, so that teases that all the Shaws might be together for a future Hobbs and Shaw movie, making it a proper family business. Brother, sister and mum are all these sort of East End gangsters.
And there's another one where The Rock's character Luke Hobbs gets one back on Deckard Shaw by playing a prank on him and calling the police on him, which is a hilarious gag that was played off earlier in the film, and then he gets him back at this one. It was a bit unnecessary, this one. Fell a little bit flat, but it was fine.
But the biggest reveal was 2 scenes actually, one right at the start of the credits and one right at the end, and that is Ryan Reynolds, who plays that Agent Locke character from the CIA, or at least we think. It's a shot of a corridor where loads of agents have been beaten up. They're all on the ground. And then it cuts inside a room at the end of it where the door's locked. And it's Ryan Reynolds on the phone to The Rock saying, I really need your help. I need that extraction now. And then he just starts to talk about Game of Thrones things again. It's all played up for laughs.
But then it gets quite interesting because while the scene is just completely, as you said, played for laughs, there's a lot of interesting details that are thrown in there because it's a long shot of just Ryan Reynolds talking, and we don't actually hear The Rock talk for a while. There's another gag in it where he's actually on the phone to his daughter first and then has to pass him over to The Rock. But the things he's saying, they might be building up Ryan Reynolds to be the big villain from this film, because while the primary villain of this movie, the antagonist, was played by Idris Elba, and played very well, I might add, he was under the directive of someone bigger who we don't see. It's just a disembodied voice. And there were hints that the prime directive, big boss man person, had links with The Rock's character. So we think that this might be Ryan Reynolds is the big bad, potentially. That would be insane.
Which is really, really inspired, because you look at Reynolds' character, the way he plays it, it's not a CIA character. He's almost psychotically obsessed with The Rock, with Hobbs. And he even says at the end that he managed to stab a guy through the heart with a brick. And previously in the movie, he said how that was impossible and he didn't know how it was done. And that was something only Idris Elba's character could have done with his enhanced superpowers, really. He's a robot. So if Ryan Reynolds' character can do that, which is impossible even in the Fast and Furious universe, that implies he also has the same technology inside of him.
And there's something that you briefly mentioned earlier that I wanted to pick up on, because when he said, I could really use that extraction right now, that could just mean, I really need to get out of this building, please help me. But it could also be a reference to the overarching plot from the film, where there was a virus that needed to be extracted out of someone. So perhaps Ryan Reynolds' character has now got the virus inside of him. And he also mentioned another virus. There was the one called Snowflake from this film, which burns your insides out. Then he said there's another one that burns your outsides. So maybe he's got that one now.
So for me, I think this is clearly setting Reynolds up as the antagonist for Hobbs and Shaw 2, as a kind of Joker-style, insane villain who's obsessed with Hobbs and wants to bring him down and also make him a part of the Etienne super race as well. Or he teams up with them both, possibly teasing how all of these end credit scenes play into the next Hobbs and Shaw movie. The Rock tweeted, "Yes sir, post-credit scenes will give you an idea of the new future team." So either that's Helen Mirren's character becoming part of the family of Shaw, or Ryan Reynolds' character teaming up with Hobbs and Shaw.
And also Kevin Hart, maybe?
We're through the looking glass here, people.
But I think Reynolds is going to be the villain now.
Hopefully.
So that's the entire film. Not one single reference to the Fast and Furious 9 movie or Vin Diesel or any of that stuff.
Wouldn't even know it's in part of the same universe.
So maybe there really is some shade there, some tension going on between the cast members.
Interestingly though, for the Fast and Furious 9 cast, there's actually Helen Mirren, who plays Jason Statham's mum, is in Fast and Furious 9. But The Rock and Jason Statham aren't.
They might appear in it, but, you know, They're not on IMDb at the moment. Luke and Laurie asked you yesterday who you would cast as Wolverine in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
So we had one from a user called Silent Death who said Tom Hardy as everything. He's pretty good, about the right height, likes to throw himself into roles. If they stick to the Wolverine works better R-rated than PG, because he does, then those films could be epic.
I can't see Tom Hardy being cast as Wolverine, unfortunately, although it is inspired, because he's already cast as Venom, which is technically in the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, it's kind of sort of in the Marvel Universe, but also not. It's a weird hybrid at the minute.
And Crazy Lewis said, I would cast Ollie Davis as Wolverine. He's hairy enough. We're both hairy men. I'm more hairy.
I mean, we can't see that because the book's in the way, but Ollie is far more hairier than I am. And the last one from Bad Dong says, after seeing him in The Boys, I think Carl Urban could be a good Wolverine.
He's a good Dredd. He's a good Butcher from The Boys. Carl Urban is a good everything, really. He's a good Bones in Star Trek. But I think Taron Egerton, I really like him as a potential
I
Wolverine.
bloody love Taron Egerton, so I would love that. But Carl Urban, unfortunately, is already in the MCU because he was in Thor Ragnarok, and he had the two guns called Des and Troy, because they destroy. It was great.
Remember, comment below to today's question, which is, what did you think of Hobbs and Shaw? And will you be going to see it? Because myself and Pete will be reading out those best comments on Monday's episode. But for now, please press the thumbs up button and give us a subscribe, because we're getting swifty to 50,000 subscribers. And press the videos on screen now to catch up the latest awesome ScreenStalker stuff. I've been Ollie Davis. This has been Chopper Pete Quinnell. And remember, we're watching.